at the beginning. So takes a while to get started, the recording.
It's such a
I,
delay. So weird.
it is weird.
And I feel like it didn't used to always do that.
No, no, it's still circling. We're live. All right. Um, I'm here with Tiffany Spencer, and we haven't met in real
No.
life, but I know you from Twitter, and I don't know, you came up on my feed, and I looked at your profile, and I thought, my God, you have Esor Consulting, HBCU Force, which is now Tech Forward, Black Tech, Orlando Tech, Dreamin' in Color. Like, how are you doing all these things? And well, thank you for joining me, Tiffany.
Thank you. Thank
So,
you so much for having me.
oh, it's a pleasure, and I can't imagine how busy you are. But uh, so how I usually like to interview people is I'm really interested in your origin story. Like, how did you grow up dreaming of being a Salesforce consultant, or how did you get into consulting?
Yeah, so I did not dream of consulting. I don't think I even knew consulting was a thing. Like, there was no House of Lies when I was in school that I can remember. And so I didn't know that this was even a career path. I knew I was interested in technology. I
Mhm.
knew I was not a coder, right? So I knew I
Sure.
didn't want to code. I know I didn't want to do the help desk things, but I like knowing how things work
Yeah.
and I like helping people. And so even when I graduated, I still had no idea what type of IT role I really wanted. It's like, I don't know what any of these things mean. I think I want to be it's like some sort of systems engineer or something engineer in it. I
Right.
don't know. So when I got my first Salesforce role, and um, which is really interesting, right? So they hired me. I went to training. So I did the
Mhm.
5 day training, and this was 13 years ago, back when
Before
Salesforce was
Trailhead.
yeah, and back when you remember when Salesforce was really involved in their customers getting like implemented in the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah.
So um, after that was done, all the executives at the company changed because they
Oh,
moved from Atlanta to Orlando. And
okay.
so I had to do a reimplementation. And so I was almost like an admin and a consultant all in one in my
Right.
very first role. And I did really well at it. I really took to Salesforce. I really liked it. And so as I continued with the admin and being a
Mhm.
business analyst, and sometimes when you're an admin for a company, sometimes the company doesn't listen to you. They're like, we're going to pay a consultant to come in
Right.
even though we have these people that look at our work every day, we're still gonna,
Right.
maybe, nah, I don't, let's get a third opinion. So, after going through a couple rounds of that, I was like, I think I really want to go into consulting.
Right.
So,
That's beautiful. A lot of people take that path from admin and they get overloaded, right? It sounds like that's a lot, putting a lot on an admin, right? And they say, I should get paid for this, right? You're doing it full time for other people. Um, you are one of the founders of Esor Consulting, as I
hmm
understand it. Could you, and I know you guys do what, nonprofit and higher education or education.
hmm
Could you tell me about Eastward Consulting? When did you decide to get into that, building a company, and what does Eastward Consulting do?
yeah. So originally, when I started training people on Salesforce, and so I had my very first training group. I was training like 5 or 6 people,
Mhm.
and we went through all the trails, all the super badges. I had them working with me, and I'm like, okay, let's start interviewing. I know you're getting ready for your certification. Just tell them, you had a Salesforce MVP, somebody's been in this space training you, and just really talk about what you've been learning. And everybody, they kept hearing the same thing. Oh, you don't have enough experience. You don't have enough
Yeah.
experience. I'm like, well, what are they supposed to do?
It's a
Since,
catch-22, right?
yeah. And so because I was doing some independent consulting and I had a few side projects, I
Mhm.
started to allow those people to be consultants on my projects and I would just oversee them. Then that
Okay.
way they had projects. And
Right.
so I said, this is working well. But if I'm going to continue to do this, I need more projects.
Mm,
Therefore, I might want to have a consulting company. And so I
yeah.
started kind of hatching out this plan to kind of work out of my day job into a full time consultancy
Hmm.
over time. And then I just so happened to meet Ronaldo, who was already trying to do some things in the Salesforce partner space. And
Okay.
we just decided to, okay, well, let's add on a consulting component to this and let's start, as a partner. And it grew so fast. And that's kind of how we started.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's good to have a partner too, right? So
Mhm.
you're not doing it all on your own. Um, how many consultants do you have now in Esor?
So we have maybe 6 full time and then
Hmm.
a group of subs that we use for
Right.
different um, pieces. And so we were working to ramp up before we were acquired by Bitwise. And so that's where Bitwise comes in.
I didn't know that. So you're required.
Yeah, so we're still waiting on a press release. So your podcast will get it first, but you've seen it on some of the announcements.
Okay. Breaking news.
Breaking news,
SR
John.
Consulting is acquired by Bitwise. Well, that's exciting.
Hmm.
Well, congratulations on that too. Um, what is the focus? What's your typical customer at Esor Consulting?
Yeah, being that we were a newer partner, we started, of course, with some of the smaller nonprofits. And so
Mhm.
we have small and medium sized nonprofits and schools that we're working with. So the nonprofits are all kind of different nonprofits. So we do just basic fundraising, PMM, case
Right.
management, a lot of form work, a lot of part out work. We've worked with a few charter schools
Yeah.
and a few HBCUs. And
Mm.
so a good little mix of projects, but a majority of them on the nonprofit side. And we have a good amount of projects that involve part out and form assembly or form set.
Right. Right. Speaking of HBCUs, um, amongst the many things you do, and I still want to know how you do it all. You started HBCU Force, and which is
Hmm.
now Tech Forward. Could you tell us about Tech Forward and
Hmm.
for people who don't know what an HBCU is, and how Tech Forward works?
Yeah, so HBCUs are historically Black colleges and universities. And many, many years ago, that was, Blacks could only be educated at those institutions because
Mhm.
other institutions would not allow Black people to be enrolled at their schools. And so there were schools that were given land grants by the government to build and continue to upkeep these schools and universities. And so there are a little over 100 of them that are still active today. Most of them are east, so
Mhm.
Texas and over, and a lot of them are in the south.
Right.
And so, historically, HBCUs have been, very much underfunded and but very resourceful. And so,
Right.
even though there's only 100 of them, they are responsible for a majority of the educated African Americans that you probably know and see today. They graduate a large majority of professionals, doctors,
Mhm.
lawyers, and so um, there's a very, very rich history and tradition across those universities. So initially, when I started, I was just working with my alma mater, which is Bethune Cookman University,
Mhm.
which is in Daytona Beach, founded by Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. And speaking with some students that were science majors, right? CIS,
Mhm.
CS majors, and telling them about what I do, right? And so I'm like, oh, I
Right.
work at a Salesforce administrator or a Salesforce consultant, and this is what I do. And, they're like, what's a Salesforce? So do
Right.
you sell stuff? What do you sell? Are it was just there was nobody was like, "Oh, that
Right.
sounds amazing." They were like, "Okay, lady, thank you." Um, and so I recognized that there was a bit of a gap there with
Mhm.
this amazing ecosystem and all the opportunities with the students that were at Bethune Cookman. And so I started there with a pilot program, working with a few students, helping them learn Trailhead,
Yeah.
partner with a few partners to get them internships, got a few students certified, got them really great jobs graduating, and decided I wanted to scale that.
Yeah.
And over the years, or over this past year or two, we actually started to work with a few nonprofits that were looking to roll out some Salesforce consulting programs. And I was getting referred to a lot of career transitioners. To remember, the very first group I had were not students, those were
Right.
career transitioners in the community. And so um, looking at just the groups that we were working with is how we then decided to do the name change to Tech
Right.
Forward with the different programs rolling under Tech Forward. So we have HBCU Forward, Community Forward, which is our work we do with nonprofits and community colleges and
Mhm.
high schools. And then we have Forward into Tech, which is our work we do with career transitioners, so people looking to skill up.
That that is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it's such a good program, and when I first saw it, it blew me away because it's just when you're a college student, it's hard to make that connection, right? And they don't
Hmm.
teach Salesforce in general, right? You
No.
learn, I mean, you're lucky if you learn Java, right, or some kind of programming language, and understanding, making that connection between what you're learning and what your potential is, right, is
Hmm.
something that you must see. um, One of the things I talked about with people is, there's three forms of capital that really determine your life. There's human capital, which is what you learn, right? Which is what
Hmm.
part of what you're teaching and what part of what the colleges and universities do. There's the social capital, which I think is what really Tech Forward does, is like making those social connections,
Hmm.
of getting to know people. And then the final capital is just capital, which is the money that comes from it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the more people can maximize these things, the better their life will be. So I guess that's a long way of saying is just when I look at this, I see you're spreading through capitalism, right? Such a beautiful thing that's going to make such difference in people's lives. Um, I'm preaching to the choir, but
That's
so
the goal. Yeah.
so what have you learned from Tech Forward and working with young people looking for to start a career?
Oh my gosh. And so it's remembering how how different the world is versus what you know when you're in college, right? There's such a gap there. If you have not done a ton of interning or research or really been in the space, understanding how an
Right,
enterprise level company, a Fortune 500 company works, it's like
right,
night and day. And so, I mean, just the idea that you want a 19-year-old to decide what they want to do for the rest of their lives when they don't even know how companies work is just
right,
ludicrous. It's just crazy to me. And the one of the goals we have is really to connect with the students to help them think about what they think they want to do,
right.
right? Because a lot of the career counselors and teachers and professors, they teach more traditional paths,
Mhm.
right? And so technology, career paths, job titles, they change so fast. I mean, who it,
Yes.
like you said, Salesforce administrator is not on any career counselor's list. It's like it's
No.
not there. Um, and so one of the things we really take the time to do with students is try to understand what is it that they think they want to do,
Mhm.
and we try to talk to them about, okay, let me tell you how this translates into how companies actually work.
Right.
And we bring in career speakers and we do panels so that they can start to like visualize it and look at job descriptions differently. We pull up, I like to do an exercise where I pull up a job description and
Yeah.
I, do the business terminology translation, like, which should totally be a game. Like,
Yeah.
translate this job description into what it actually means.
Right. Like fast-paced environment. You always see that in a job posting. Like run the other way.
Yes, exactly.
Means you're
Exactly.
underpaid and overburdened.
Yeah. And so just remembering that and trying
Mhm.
to make that connection, um, trying to help them even understand. I tell students all the time, living is expensive. And with this social media, Instagram world, yes, business ownership looks glamorous. It looks
Mhm.
amazing. Being a social media influencer, that sounds like a lot of fun until you can't pay your rent because you're not making
Right.
enough money. And so let's talk about real planning. Let's talk about what is it that you need to have in place when you graduate in order to set yourself up. And this idea that you don't have to pick a lane right now. Like, let's get a job with benefits, with a
Right.
401k. Let's add on these other things that you think you might be interested in, and let's see how it works out. But let's not waste four
Yeah.
years so you can start your clothing company right now. Like, unless you're already making money, let's let's get there. We can get there. I don't, I try to tell students I don't want to discourage
Yeah.
you, but I also want you to have some options. And so,
Yeah.
even kind of talking through that, encouraging them, but also saying, hey, listen, here's another option.
Right. That's amazing because yeah, you when you are in college and a young person, it is hard to project yourself into what your life is going to look like and what it can look like, right? So um, aiming not too short, so you're not aiming not too low and not aiming too high, right? That you're going to live this Instagram life, but you can live a damn good life, right?
Hmm.
Like just by doing uh, trailheads, right? In
Hmm.
living the life. One thing I saw you wrote on Twitter a few days ago, I think, was about what Black employees go through and microaggressions and what it's like to be a Black employee or a Black consultant. What would you tell a manager about their Black employees? What would you want them to know?
I'm sure somewhere there's some really good training or examples. This idea of recognizing, or I guess one thing is really listening and understanding. And
Mm,
so, for managers to really make sure they are listening to their Black employees and making sure they actually understand what they're trying to express.
mhm.
Because it's one thing to hear someone say, "Hey, this client, said XYZ to me,"
Yeah,
right? Right? You okay? The client said this to you, but if you're really listening to your consultant, it's a level deeper to say, you know, how do you feel about that? What do is that you sound upset about that? Do you think there's something else there, right? To make sure that the managers are really understanding what's happening because it's difficult sometimes for your Black employees to really upfront say, I think this person is undermining me. They are
yeah,
challenging my skill set. They're challenging
mm,
my expertise as a consultant. And that is
right,
insulting. And so for someone to brush that under the rug can totally erode a consultant's confidence and
mm,
not only their skills, but in you as a manager, right? And
right,
so you now have lost something with your consultant and now they're that much closer to wanting to leave.
right. Yeah, yeah. It's it's always being a consultant adds an extra layer, right? Because you're kind of a guest at a place, right? And maybe they don't know you as well, so they rely on whatever, right? Some kind of stereotype or some kind of feeling, or um, it's interesting. I've never, I haven't managed a lot of people. I've managed two women before, and when I heard their experiences, it was kind of like there wasn't any like outright sexism that they dealt with. It wasn't like I'm not going to work with you with the women, but it was just a lot of weird stuff, right? And it wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily like what you would think of coming from a man, right? It was like just from other women or just some strange things that you wouldn't think about the stereotypical I don't like working with women. And I imagine
Right.
Black employees go through similar things, right? Like
Right,
not
because
a
when
lot of people
people
are saying I'm not going to
hadn't
work with you because you're Black, right?
right, that's what happens, that most managers or other people, they think it's more, in your face, like, "Oh, I don't like Black
Right,
people. Let's get this person off my project." And that's what they're looking for. They're like, "Oh my God, I didn't hear them say that they hate Black people." Well,
right,
no, they're not gonna say that. But what they will do is say, "Oh, let me ask John. I hear you, Tiffany, but let me see what John thinks."
Yeah.
And and when you see that and say, well, I think what Tiffany said is right, and Tiffany's an expert, right? Or and so when that would come to you, you would say,
Yeah.
hey, the client is really second guessing me a lot. They're defaulting to John. Well, if you're
Yeah.
not truly
Yeah.
listening and understanding and empathizing, you would say, well, it's fine. A customer might like John better. Well, you just
Right.
totally dismiss what that person was trying to say to you. Like
Yeah.
you totally missed it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's there's an endless supply of reasons for marginalizing people, right? And it's could be because you're too black or you're too white or too short or too tall or too pretty or too ugly or whatever, right? And it's just bringing those dynamics into the workplace just it adds a kind of an underlying stress to everything, you know.
Are you married,
Um,
John?
I am married.
And so I like to think of this as the example. If you think about if something's wrong with your wife's car and you're
Mhm.
like, I think this is it. And she goes, no, I'm gonna call my dad. You're like, excuse me? You're gonna
Right.
what?
Yeah.
Like just somebody, right? Somebody
Right.
else might say, well, she just wants to call her dad, but you're like, no, that really you insulted me, right? And just
Yeah.
thinking, sometimes
Right.
people make these. Hmm.
That's a really good analogy. Um, the other thing I saw, I mean, the list of stuff you could do goes on and on, and I imagine you have a personal life as well. But one other thing, Dreamin' in Color, coming what June 30th. Tell
Hmm.
us about Dreamin' in Color. What is it? Where did the idea come from, and what's happening?
Yes. So Dreaming in Color is the very first and only conference geared toward current or aspiring Black Salesforce professionals, where we're going to discuss
Right.
how to succeed, overcome obstacles, and grow thriving careers and businesses in the Salesforce ecosystem. Um, the idea for this honestly came from my trip to Tulsa during Juneteenth.
Okay.
Um, a few years ago, there was a lot of talk about Tulsa and the massacre there and Black
Uh-huh.
Wall Street. And it was almost like this new thing that people were learning. Like, oh my God, there was a whole town that was destroyed. I'm like, yes, this happened all over the US. Tulsa's not the only place that was burned to the ground. Those businesses there weren't the only businesses that were destroyed by people that were threatened and felt threatened by Black people succeeding and making their own economies and income. And so hearing those stories and seeing how though the people of Tulsa are working to rebuild that area to,
Right.
reckon with that the history of what has happened made me think about this idea of working together collectively to identify and solve problems together. And
Right.
so, which is the quantum principle, Eugenia, that is the missing the word. It's the vision statement for our conference for this year. And so there's a few ideas for Dreaming Color. So one was to be able to bring and make visible all of the current and aspiring Black Salesforce professionals, right? Because I think
Yeah.
that sometimes I can remember not being really involved in the Salesforce ecosystem,
Uh-huh.
and for no real reason other than it just wasn't very diverse 13 years ago, and I'm
Mm.
pretty active, and so I was just like, I'll go to a couple things, and it was nice. But a few years ago, when I came out to a few events, and I did a few events back to back, I really enjoyed it, and I was like,
Right.
man, I've been missing out. Um, and so the one of the ideas is to create a space where I can
Hmm.
attract people that look like me, that
Yeah.
want to congregate and network and learn from people that share their experience and feel just this energy of the Salesforce Ohana and hopefully get them into other events and coming out
Right.
more and having Dreaming in Color meetups at other events. But to be able to
Right.
have this one safe space first that's just speaking to them, that they're like, you know what, I am, because it's exhausting sometimes being
Yeah.
in spaces that that you feel left out of. And so
I understand.
that was the idea, was just to celebrate and uplift the Black Salesforce professionals and in this space and allies in
Yeah.
this space. And we're going to have a lot of really, really good sessions.
That's fantastic. That sounds really exciting. Um, I'd love to hear more about it and hear how it goes. Um, I guess that's the you do so much, uh, Tiffany. And what do you do in your personal time, if you have any personal time? Like,
My
how do
husband
you
and I like to go eat
decompress?
Mexican food.
Now, is your husband a Salesforce person too?
He is. He's a Salesforce. He's a solution architect at Ticketmaster.
There you go. So
Hmm.
when you are eating Mexican's food out, you're not talking about objects and different technology, are you? So
No, we like to go out to different
okay,
restaurants. So I know all the restaurants in Orlando. We go out
yeah,
and we're back and forth to Atlanta and different places. So we're starting to do a little bit more traveling. My husband is set
fantastic.
on building us a house, so he's been looking at lots of house plans, and so we'll be building us a house. I don't know. I do all kind of things. I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay.
We binge watch a lot of Netflix together and Disney
Ah,
Plus.
you and me both. It's nice because I mean, my wife is not in technology and she has no idea what I do. She just thinks I type in a computer. So it must be nice to have someone that at least understands what you do,
Yeah,
on some level.
yeah.
Um, oh, that's great. So, um, any plans after Esor gets acquired? Are you continuing your same job? Is that what you're
Yeah,
planning on
so my
doing?
new title is going to be VP of Salesforce Partnerships at Bitwise. So, um, working with all of the Salesforce partnerships and
Right.
managing the Salesforce partnership and all the other partnerships uh, will be what I will be doing. So you'll see me everywhere doing all the things.
That's exciting. Well, Tiffany, it was great meeting you. I watched this morning your Trailblazer video,
Did
and
you?
yeah, it absolutely blew me away. It was like a little movie. In fact, I was almost late bringing my daughter to school this morning because I was watching.
Salesforce did an amazing job with those.
Amazing.
They look so good.
And your parents were in it too.
Yeah,
They must be so proud.
they are.
They seem like wonderful people.
My mom is officially a fundraiser or development director with Tech Forward now. She's retired, so this is her new
Amazing.
job.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me. It was great meeting you, Tiffany. I feel almost guilty taking your time, but I hope this gets the word out on all the activities you're doing. It's amazing stuff. You're doing things that people talk about, right? And making a difference in the world. So thank you for everything that you do, Tiffany.
Thank you, John.
All right. And I hope to see you around. And if you need any help with anything,
Of
I'm here.
course.
All
Of
right, Tiffany.
course.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye.